Well, I've seen that the kids are dressed.
So I've done the former 5 years all the people are my degree from 1 to 2 months. And she was crossing the street. And so I beat there and waved and the other one. No, it's not.
When I was coming down,
I can hear you.
Oh, well.
Okay.
anyway, I was trying to meet you right out.
My dad.
Oh, Berlin.
Yeah, but the other thing was.
So when they got time to come to me, they were happily on the head. They're almost at the same time. I love.
Wow.
I'm not very good. My mother loves school. And she enjoys it, so every time I bring something.
Good morning, man. Good morning. How are you? Good. I missed you last week. Guess you were.
Oh, sorry.
My grandmother said,
Where are they from? Where
help us.
My family is from Zagreb, from Croatia.
beautiful area.
I've been there.
Beautiful. Yeah. Where's the trip? Yeah, it's gonna be. We're gonna go to various places, drink wine and enjoy each It's supposed to be nice. Can I get even more? And they're all cooking, so I got. Well, we were, I can't find where it works. So we're supposed to go to Israel. Yeah.
Oh, there's like the floor.
There will be
Maybe you need some help.
I saw it. Yeah. That's the only, and it's a big fish. With the second now. Good to see you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, and then beyond. Yeah. Would you pass if you sure. Yeah.
Actually, I probably would.
No, I don't think you did. We'll talk when you see it.
Wow.
That sounds great. I love the
I know all about it.
Morning. How are you? How's your friend? Good morning, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Okay. First of all, thanks to everybody who participated in the bagels adventure. Thanks to Eileen and Gary Kammer for both the bagels and the live stream, both in honor, Gary, of your birthday. Happy birthday. When is it? Okay, very good. Many more. Admei Esrim. 120 doesn't seem enough anymore, does it?
Well, I suppose this is time.
Yeah, Moses 120, but you know, they didn't have stents and they didn't have colonoscopies. Am I wrong about that? No. So maybe we have to, but 120 is a nice mathematical number, isn't it? I mean, it's 5 factorial. 5 times 4 times 3 is 2 to 1. If we had to add a 6 there, what would that make it? 720. So you'd lose the factorialization. Anyhow, many, many more wonderful years, Gary. And thanks to Sandy so much for the picking up the bagels. Appreciate it a lot. Sometimes people wonder if there's going to be Torah study on the weekend of Thanksgiving, and the answer is yes. We will have regular session next week. Moving on to maybe our next topic, we will see. You have in front of you a flyer. This is a program that Jonathan Moyer and I cooked up together. Jonathan, as you may know, accompanies us for the high holidays. A wonderful musician and a wonderful person. And I said to him several months ago, wouldn't it be nice to do an all-Bach concert in your big sanctuary? I don't know about you. To me, there's nothing as wonderful as a organ recital in a great Gothic sanctuary. I mean, I've done it a couple of times in my life, and they're so memorable. So I suggested some pieces to him that I love, and he's going to do 5 Bach preludes and fugues. There's a fantasia, there's a toccata, and so on. And I'm going to be making some comments between pieces. He said to me he needs a couple of minutes between pieces to reset the organ. So I volunteered to fill in. So come, 4 o'clock next Sunday, a week from tomorrow, at the Church of the Covenant, for a wonderful, wonderful experience. I hope you'll come. Okay, blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. We praise you, Lord, our God, sovereign in the universe, who sanctifies us through God's commandments, enjoining upon us the obligation to immerse ourselves in words of Torah. Amen. Okay, so we are working on the issue of sibling rivalry. We looked at Cain and Abel. We're basically done, it seems to me, with Jacob and Esau. I mean, there's more that can be said, but we did read last week the great reconciliation between Jacob and Esau, when Jacob, terrified of Esau, thinking that he will still be harboring resentment and revenge and murderous intent, prepares for Esau's arrival and bows low and with great obeisance and gifts. And when Esau comes to him, he doesn't have any hint of resentment. Perhaps over those years he allowed it to dissipate. That would be a way of talking about it passively. The passage of time just did its work on dissipating the resentment. It's possible also that he thought about it and thought that resentment is a poison to the one who harbors it, and decided it was better not to. It's possible that he also felt something powerful for his brother, maybe even accepted his brother's idiosyncrasies, and was willing to forgive him. There is an interesting idea, Doris, you and I have talked about this, and that is 2 kinds of forgiveness. What Martha Nussbaum, philosopher and legal scholar at the University of Chicago, calls transactional forgiveness, where I'm willing to forgive you if you first apologize. You have to do something for me before I'm willing to do it for you. But a purer form of forgiveness, I'm not sure if he gives it a special name, but let's call it love, is a gesture of forgiveness from the heart of the individual, without needing anything in advance. And that very well may be what Esau does. We just don't know. Here the story is laconic, at least it doesn't deal with this question. But what does happen when Esau and Jacob finally meet is that Esau throws his arms around the neck of Jacob. They kiss. Esau says, seeing your face is like seeing the face of God, which is a pretty amazing statement, really. That, if one wants to think of that as in a non-literal way, but seeing the face of God carries with it so many connotations. A sense of goodness, a sense of forgiveness, a sense of purity, the wholeness. That can mean a lot of things. And yet it seems that that's a gesture of purity on Esau's part. And Jacob insists on giving him gifts. And Esau says, and I quoted this last night, I was over at Fairmount last night. We had a home and home last night. So some of our clergy went there, and some of their clergy came here. We had a wonderful service there, and I understand it was really lovely here. And I quoted Esau last night in my brief Devar Torah. I'm smiling because brief and Rabbi Klein's Devar Torah, two ideas that don't seem to go together that well. Kathy famously laminated a comment that I made once. I will be giving a brief Devar Torah tonight. And she waves it around from time to time as I'm moving to my 25th minute. Hey, but the truth has to be given time to mature, doesn't it? Anyhow, so when Esau kisses Jacob and Jacob insists on giving him gifts, Esau says, Yesh li rav achi. I have enough. Who is rich? The one who is satisfied with his portion. I can see I can take more gifts from you, but I'm feeling satisfied. But he also adds to, I have enough, my brother. And that's an embrace, isn't it, of the brother from whom he has been estranged and at the outset manipulated. So that strikes me as an important part of this question of sibling rivalry. They heal themselves. How Esau prepared for the healing, I don't know. Jacob certainly was terrified. Maybe he didn't harbor any longer ill will toward Esau. I'm not sure if he did at the beginning. He manipulated him. But the story goes on that Jacob insists on it. Why don't we turn there quickly? Genesis 32. Genesis 32, well, we're in 33 actually. This coming week's Torah portion. All right, there it is. So 33 verse 4. Esau ran to greet him, he embraced him, and falling on his neck, he kissed him, and they wept. Moment of reconciliation, isn't it? Looking about, he saw the women and the children. Who, he asked, are these with you? And he answered, the children with whom God has favored your servant. That's not the Jacob in the original story, where Jacob is manipulating the situation and filled with himself and with his needs. The children with whom God has favored your servant. Then the maids with their children came forward, bowed low. Next, Leah with her children came forward and bowed low. And last, Joseph and Rachel came forward and bowed low. That's a little bit of a minor key moment, isn't it? When Jacob, in a way, is lining up the children in terms of their vulnerability with the favored wife and favored son last, right? It's the most protected. one risks making too much out of that, but it does strike me as an echo of the story of parental favoritism. And verse 8, he asked, what do you mean by all this company I've met? And he answered, to gain my Lord's favor. And Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Let what you have remain yours. But Jacob said, no, I pray you, if you do me this favor, accept from me this gift, for to see your face is like seeing the face of God. I think I said that was what Esau said, but it's what Jacob says. And you have received me favorably. Please accept my present, which has been brought for you, for God has favored me and I have plenty. And here I think is another very moving moment. And when he urged him, he accepted. I don't need it, but I'm coming to see that it matters to you, Jacob, that I take something from you. And therefore, I'm going to take it. I have a friend who says regularly, my mother used to say to me, just say thank you. That's what Esau does. Now, if we hold on to this moment and go back to chapter 25, the beginning of the story, 25 at the very end of 25, verse 34. I emphasized this last week. Jacob then gave Esau bread and lentil stew. And then I pointed out there are 5 verbs right in a row, like the patter of a machine gun going off, one after another. So Esau is ravenous here. We see his emotions. He's all emotion at this point. He can't fill his belly fast enough, right? Vayocha, vayesht, vayakam, vayelech, vayivets, and he despised his birthright. Now, if we go here to chapter 33, verse 11, that's kind of the concluding moment of this relationship. Please accept my present, which has been brought to you, for God has favored me and I have plenty. And when he, Jacob, urged him, Esau, he accepted. And the Hebrew here is in nice contrast. So, Yeshli kol, I have plenty, vayiftzar bo, and he urged him, vayikach. Just one simple verb. He took it. To me, that's a really amazing moment, especially when Esau himself has been transformed and is much calmer, more stable, more caught up in his affection for his brother and his willingness to accept him. So I think of this story, especially at the climax of it, as one of the real high moments in biblical literature, where we see 2 people, 2 brothers who were rivalrous and at each other from the very beginning. You remember that Jacob recognized that Esau might, at least he was worried that Esau might kill him out of revenge, and so he leaves and he's gone for 20 years. So I think it really is a powerful story of how brothers are able to heal their own rift. That happens, of course, in the Joseph story too, which I think is structurally quite similar. The parents at the beginning have let's call it a poisoning role, and the brothers are after each other themselves. But along the way, when the parents are no longer involved, the brothers take care of it. So here I think the Torah is quite optimistic about families having the capacity to heal their own, let's call it pathologies or rifts or problems. Very humanistic impulse here in the literature, isn't it? Even though the Torah, in a very tantalizing way, does not give us all the information we might like to have about it. Okay, Jim?
But doesn't Esau's comment underline the personalities again?
Good. Tell me.
It says, I have plenty, not said, you never have enough.
You namely Jacob or one?
Yeah, I have plenty. In other words, when he gave him the suit, that's all I wanted was the suit. But you don't quit.
Who's the you there?
Jacob.
Jacob doesn't quit?
No, he's always got something else on the agenda.
I see what you mean. And what's on the agenda here?
Not to get killed.
Interesting point. Good. I like that. He's frightened. He prepares for it. He puts the women across the river. Even maybe at this moment, you might say, though he's relieved, he's still, okay, I like that. So,
Esau's of the moment, and he's fine.
yeah.
But he knows his brother at this point.
It's a good point, though. I would disagree that Esau's of the moment. It strikes me that there's been a process of transformation at work.
Yeah, but I think the line underscores both personalities quite well.
I have enough.
I have enough, and he doesn't say what's obvious. You never have enough.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay. So you feel that Esau, that both of them are still their original selves.
But they accept it.
Okay. I like that. So my point could quickly be overstated, that there has been a major turnaround. And in a way, they're very different people. One might infer that from what I've been saying. But I think you're moderating it by saying, we don't transform ourselves from one kind of person to the opposite. We carry with us who we are, and maybe that's part of the realism, that we have to accept who we are. There are some problematic aspects, but we still can rise above it without being the opposite. No, I like it. I like that. Good. Stuart.
Jacob accepted the stew and the birthright, and then went away for 20 years.
Yes.
During those 20 years, what happened to the birthright?
I think he always has it in the sense that by the birthright, it means that you now become the leader of the family. And it's Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's not Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. And so it's the difference maybe between role and identity. I'm not sure that works. The role is now secure and permanent. It's always Jacob, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The sons of Jacob, not the children of Esau, carry the line forward. So I think it doesn't have anything to do with behavior per se, but your place in the family and the generations.
The person who got the birthright inherited twice the inheritance of
Right.
the person who didn't get a birthright.
I think that's right, yeah. Later on, I think in Deuteronomy. Not necessarily here, but let's say yes. But also I think it has something to do with the prime person in the family.
Yeah.
You're not buying that?
No.
No. Okay, why not?
Because he went away for 20 years and abandoned his birthright.
Abandon if he's now the prime person in the family, he's abandoned that role and therefore the family.
Yes.
It was Rebecca who said, quickly go, I can't lose two children on the same day. And she convinces Isaac that this is the right thing to do. Just as Jacob is about to leave, he gets the blessing, maybe the reaffirmation of the blessing. So the parents recognize that has to be the case, and therefore Jacob is relieved of that responsibility. You accept that?
Yeah.
Well. Okay, all right. but I think you do have a good point. We don't see that he's involved in family affairs. I mean, he could go back a couple of times and so on. That's part of the point that you're making here. Very, very good. You know, once again, you caused me to be impressed, to recognize how impressive the narrator is. The narrator really knows what the narrator is up to. And, you know, if I were writing this story, or Stuart, if you were writing the story, at this moment, you might expound a little bit on what does it mean that Jacob has left all of those years, and explored Jacob's character and personality. Yeah. And the author doesn't do that, not that that's the author's move is the only right move, but the author has on the author's mind how this story should continue. I mean, Jacob goes and he gets those wives and concubines and all those children, blessed by God, and then he's called to come back. So, in a way, it might seem like a digression, but an important one because it lays the groundwork for the stories to come. Anyhow, Malcolm?
I now admit that this draws from personal experience, but to me this story also speaks to the need for...
You have to talk a little louder.
The need for reconciliation among siblings.
You're questioning that?
I'm not questioning it. I'm just suggesting that this story, at some level, is simply a very human need. These two brothers, issue of the same parents,
Yeah.
who are much different in character,
Yeah.
and have pursued much different lives.
Right.
Nevertheless, have some need to mend their relationship. They've had a broken relationship for much of their lives. And there's lots of intrigue here, but at its base, there seems to be some need or desire to reconcile.
I like that. You know, I sometimes work with families at the last moment of their lives, and I have seen in families that have been afflicted with estrangement, decades-long estrangement, on the deathbed, there's sometimes the estranged comes back and says, I apologize, or we're siblings. So that's an example of what you're pointing to. It's an interesting point. I think one of the inferences we can make from these stories is that rivalrousness seems not only common, but natural. Parental favor, the role of parents, the different personalities, the different interests, vocations, we'll see this with Moses and Aaron, would seem to be a series of impediments to good relationships. So there is, let's just use the language of centrifugal and centripetal forces. So the family is riven by centrifugal forces where people are pushed away from one another for some of the reasons that I've indicated. But you're also pointing out a complementary, C-O-M-P-L-E, a centripetal force that pulls them back together again if they have the opportunity and the will to do it. I like that. The forces at work in a family. And, we can take these stories literally and recognize their power in our own families, and independent of that, the power of the narrator's genius of being able to bring this to life. But I think the narrator, certainly the editor, is using the family as a metaphor for community. Because soon enough, that family is going to find itself in Egypt, and before a couple of verses is over, the 12 sons of Jacob become the 12 tribes. And now we're dealing with a community in deep peril. And it's always struck me that the Joseph story especially is just the right ending for the book of Genesis. Not only does it heal, so to speak, the sibling rivalry motif, which weaves its way through the book of Genesis, but it also prepares the ground for what it takes for a community, we might say a family writ large, has to do in order to maintain wholeness and integrity of a much larger entity, a people. And I think the author is recognizing that the problems within a community are as problematic as the problems from the outside. And that a community has to figure out how we're going to create wholeness, integrity, peace among people who, like the siblings in a family, pull at one another. The community members are as different from one another as the siblings are from one another, as we have seen over and over again. So I think the family is also metaphor, and the sibling rivalry, major motif in Genesis, I'm going to go for it here, I may be exaggerating. Part of its purpose is with the book of Exodus in mind, because this is a people imperiled by persecution, and how does it hold itself together? That may be the challenge of the book of Exodus. And we see the creation in book of the Exodus of institutions that, among other things, hold the community together. Torah, law, worship, central building, and so on. A center, law, building, worship, that are I wouldn't go so far as to say constructed only for that purpose, but have that purpose. And if a community is working well, there's some consensus about the power of law, the integrity of the courts, the importance of common values. Wonder, is any community you think of that may be in trouble in that regard? So, yeah, I mean, in a certain way, this story points to some of the issues that we're facing today. This Yeats's idea, the center cannot hold. Somebody said, Ellen?
When Jacob leaves for 20 years, he's not needed as the head of the family. Father still lives, I think, for the next 15 years, 20. So his leaving, he's not giving up his birthright because he wasn't needed at that point, Tony.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. Although the image of Esau, of Isaac, that I regularly have is lying down, which is a physical metaphor for passivity. And so what kind of a family leader might he be? But nevertheless, it's a good point. Isaac's still alive. Candy?
Why is Esau's group considered a separate nation?
So Esau leaves the family and marries outside the clan. Jacob goes north and marries within the clan. So Esau absents himself, leaves, and has we might say, a new beginning. I kind of hesitated my answer because one of the things the author has in mind is to take advantage of the demographic, the ethnological fact that Esau is the Edomites, becomes the Edomites. So this is an origin story of the Edomites from a biblical perspective. I mean, the narrators of the Edomites may have a different story about it. So it serves two functions.
So it's all because he marries outside of the clan? Or because he goes... Yeah, because that's the only difference, right?
Right.
Jacob marries Laban's children, which are
Part of the family.
part of the family.
Right. That's right.
But I just think it's kind of strange because Aaron and Moses were brothers, and they were still working together for the Jewish people. And eventually these two brothers come together and resolve their differences. And yet Esau is all the way on the back burner as far as the story goes, and or maybe it's worse than that.
Although he comes to
He's an Edomite, right?
He comes to the front burner in this particular episode. And you know, as I pointed out last week, the biblical history of the relationship between the Israelites and the Edomites is complex. There are times when they're partners, they're allies, and there are times when they're not. David, as I think I mentioned, does, when he's being pursued by the Philistines, takes his family to the Edomites for refuge. So, you know, this story has what we might call an etiological, which means it's an origin story. How did it come about that the history of these two nations has the history that it does? And the history is checkered. And the story is checkered, right? There's rivalry, and there's also comedy, C-O-M-I-T-Y. Yeah, good. All right, so, speaking of Moses and Aaron, let us move to that story. So, Exodus chapter 2. So the first thing I want to say here is, remember that the factors at work in creating this tension, this rivalry, are the parental role at the beginning, both Eve for Cain and Abel, and Isaac and Rebekah for Jacob and Esau, play a role at the beginning in the problems. They help to create the problems, but the boys themselves, here we're dealing just with brothers, the boys themselves also create their problems, right? So when we get to the Moses story, I want to suggest that the first factor doesn't seem to be at work, although it's not fully crystal clear, but that's a way of thinking about it. So, we're in chapter 2. So, a certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. Okay? So, day 1 of their marriage. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. Now just hold that, and let's I'm just going to read it. Chapter 7, verse 1. Or is it 7, verse 1? I may have lost it. Is it 6? Somewhere it says that Aaron is 3 years older. There it is. Chapter 7, verse 6. This Moses and Aaron did as the Lord commanded, so they did. Moses was 80 years old and Aaron 83 when they made their demand on Pharaoh. Okay? So Aaron's the older brother and Miriam's the older sister. And yet in chapter 2, we have their marriage. In other words, the story starts at the beginning of their marriage and moves over Aaron and Miriam in silence and goes right to Moses. Okay? Now we can certainly see the logic of the narrator here. The narrator is not pausing to say everything that occurs to him or her. The narrator wants to get to the main story. That's Moses. And that's an innocent move. The narrator has a right to omit what the narrator doesn't feel is germane. But if one wants to think about the family, this may be a hint that there's favoritism at work, because perhaps Yocheved and Amram, Moses' parents, are favoring Moses. And the story passes right over them. If you were to ask me, how how significant is what I just said on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being enormously significant. I would rate this as about a 1. It's too thin to make too much of. So why am I talking about it? Because in the stories we have seen so far, the parents are playing a very important role. And here, we might want to speculate that, like the earlier stories, the parents are playing an important role. And as interpreters, we have to hold ourselves back and not to make too much of something, though we might have a predilection to do so. You see what I mean? We've been trained as readers of these stories to think the parent's role is significant, and we might overinterpret this. So I just wanted to point that out. This seems to be a story of a family that seems to be harmonious and not riven by these rivalries, even though, once again, we have too little evidence. So let's continue just a little bit. So verse 2, the woman conceived and bore a son. When she saw how beautiful he was, the Hebrew, ki tov hu, and tov doesn't tell us that much. I mean, it might be pretty, I guess. It might be physically robust. It may have something to do with her sense of who he might be. But when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him, caulked it with bitumen and pitch, put the child in it, and so on. And then we have the wonderful story of Pharaoh's daughter and Miriam and so on. I want to move to chapter 4. So chapter 3 has God calling Moses for his role as spokesperson. So let's just see. I'm backing up to chapter 3. So verse 11. Moses' first expression of reluctance to take on the role. Once again, I mean, think of how realistic this is. God is saying to Moses, I want you to take over this big enterprise. And Moses is saying it's too much for me. And so now he is trying his hardest to get out of it by pointing out impediments to anybody who wants to take this role. I'm going to do it quickly. Verse 11. But Moses said to God, who am I? And God responds, I'll be with you. Moses says, verse 13, when I come to the Israelites and say to them, God of your fathers, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say? And God gives him his name. Okay? First 2 counter arguments. Who am I? Who are you? Chapter 4, verse 1. But Moses spoke up and said, what if they don't believe me and don't listen to me, but say the Lord did not appear to you? And the Lord said to him, what is in your hand? So here's the third problem Moses raises. Who are the people? In other words, the first 3 are, I'm not up to it. You are too mysterious, and people are just not going to believe that you spoke to me. And 3, the people themselves are fickle, and they're not likely to, even if they agree, if they accept me, it's a hazardous role that I'm playing. So Moses is systematic in his reluctance, which again is a kind of foreshadowing of the reluctance of prophets much later in the biblical story. You remember Jeremiah says to God, please, I don't want to do this. And you remember what God says to him? I chose you in the womb. You have no choice. This is not a role that is achieved. This is a role that's ascribed. So don't tell me that. So, verse 10, 4. But Moses said to the Lord, please, O Lord, I've never been a man of words, either in times past or now, that you have spoken to your servant. I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. Namely, who am I? You gave me a reason. Who are you? You gave me a reason. Who are the people? You showed me a demonstration. Now, I may be willing to take it on, but you want me to be a spokesperson, and I have a speech impediment. I may not be the right guy. And the Lord said to him, verse 11, who gives man speech? Who makes him dumb or deaf or seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will be with you as you speak and will instruct you what to say. But he said, please, O Lord, make someone else your agent. The Lord became angry with Moses, and he said, there's your brother Aaron the Levite, which is strange because Moses is a Levite. So one translation might be, there is Aaron, your brother Levite, as opposed to your brother the Levite. He I know speaks readily. Okay? So Moses has trouble communicating. And Aaron is a master at it. Moses may be a thinker, but he's not a speaker. Aristotle begins the rhetoric, his treatise on the rhetoric, by saying that rhetoric is the partner of dialectic. Dialectic is thinking through a problem. Rhetoric is the presentation of the issue. So a rhetorician needs to be a master communicator, though it may be that the rhetorician doesn't really know what he's talking about. He just has to be adept at putting it across, attracting the listeners. Whereas the dialectician is the one who will engage in argument, will think the matter through, and comes up with something, we might say, though he may not be so wonderful at putting it across, right? And I think Plato's whole project here is to combine the assets of the rhetorician with the assets of the dialectician. You think of the dialogues. They're not dry treatises. They're engaging dramas. And so maybe Plato has found the right way to combine rhetoric and dialectic. In any event, I may have overstated this here, but I've tried to point out some tension between the art of rhetoric and the art of dialectic. And Moses is the dialectician. Aaron is the rhetorician. So if you buy that to some significant degree, this already may lay the foundations for the sibling rivalry that bursts out in the scene at the Golden Calf incident. That these are two different kinds of people who are expert at different kinds of things. And that puts them in some tension with one another, even though they're going to be working together here. So that they are partners, and they are partners from beginning to end, but there is these tensions. So I'm trying to point out, once again, similar to Jacob and Esau, different kinds of character, different personalities, different interests, because we do have to account for their rivalry, which is coming up. So, there is Aaron, your brother, the Levite. I'm in the middle of verse 14. He, I know, speaks readily. Okay? I don't know the Hebrew. Ki daber yedaber. It's the use of the same verb in different forms. He's a speaker. There's an emphasis here. He I know speaks readily. Even now he is setting out to meet you. He'll be happy to see you. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. You have the words. He has the art of communication. I will be with you and with him as you speak and tell both of you what to do. So God recognizes that though they have different roles, God will be with them both. And he shall speak for you to the people. So what does that mean? Why isn't it that Moses will speak to the people directly? He will speak for you to the people, as if to suggest it's so possible to overstate all of this. It's very laconic. So I'm going to make something of it and see if it's plausible. That Moses as a communicator is not as adept at the communication as is Aaron. Thus he shall serve as your spokesman, as your mouth, with you playing the role of God to him. Okay? So you're the authority, and he is the messenger. He's the mouth. And take with you this rod with which you shall perform the signs. Now if we just go ahead to chapter 7, we find this being emphasized in different language. The Lord replied to Moses, "See, I place you in the role of God to Pharaoh with your brother Aaron as your prophet." So he's your mouth, he's your mouthpiece. We can give that function a name. That's what a prophet is. The prophet is poised between God and the people. And the communication goes in two directions, right? As God's spokesperson, the prophet is speaking for God to the people. As the people's intercessor, the arrow goes the other way. Moses is the spokesperson for the people to God. So you see the prophet, if you think of this as I visualize it, as three parties lined up, God, Moses, or prophet, people. The vector, the movement, goes from top to bottom. God speaks through the prophet to the people. But it also goes from the bottom to the top. The prophet also speaks for the people to God. So here we have the two fundamental roles of the prophet. You remember perhaps in the prophet Amos, a very famous moment, when God is ready. Amos, the Assyrians come and defeat the northern kingdom in 722, let's say. Amos's career really involves one big speech. It says in Amos 2 years before the earthquake. And scholars have decided that the earthquake in question came in 751. So Amos gives his speech in 753 before the Common Era. 30 years before the defeat by Assyria. So clouds are on the horizon. And God is ready to destroy the people. And Moses says to God at least twice, be gentle with the people. They are small. Don't expect so much of them. Be patient and be generous. There, the prophet is intercessor, speaking for the people's needs to God. That's the arrow up. Okay? So what we have back here in chapter 4 is that Aaron now will become the person who serves as a prophet for Moses, conveying God's word to the people. Okay. Which evidently Moses is not going to be fully adept at doing. Okay, I wanted to move to verse 27 of chapter 4. So the Lord said to Aaron, remember, Moses went into exile in Midian, and now he's coming back. And the Lord said to Aaron, verse 27, chapter 4, go meet Moses in the wilderness. He went and met him at the mountain of God, and he kissed him. Moses told Aaron about all the things the Lord had committed to him and all the signs about which he had instructed him. Then Moses and Aaron went and assembled all the elders of the Israelites. In other words, they come back together again. There was no apparent rift. It was just that Moses had to leave because he was in danger. And now he is coming back to fulfill his vocation. And Aaron is going to meet him because they're going to have complementary roles. And everything seems to be fine between them. Then, verse 29, Moses and Aaron went, and that's a common locution here in this story. Moses and Aaron, Moses and Aaron. They constantly are working together. Aaron, verse 30, repeated all the words that the Lord had spoken to Moses, and he performed the signs in the sight of the people. So here we see that operationalized, right? Aaron repeats the words that God had spoken to Moses, and he performed the signs in the sight of the people. I mean, Aaron knows what he's doing. It can't be just words. It has to be pictures as well. We need illustrations. This is Aaron's blackboard, right? And the people were convinced. When they heard that the Lord had taken note of the Israelites and that he had seen their plight, they bowed low in homage. Okay? So I think these early stories suggest no real tension between the brothers, which I want to make an inference. That the parents have been good parents to these brothers, and they haven't created problems. The intimation of a problem emerges only when their vocations are described as being different, though complementary, right? The intellectual needs somebody to put the message across, and the one who puts it across needn't be the intellectual, just have the words. So this is the idea person and the person's spokesperson. So even though they're different roles, they're complementary. So we don't have the origin problems that we had with Cain and Abel and Jacob and Esau. Now I want to move to the golden calf incident, chapter 32. So Moses has gone up at the top of Mount Sinai for long communication with God. And the people are getting nervous. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, the people gathered against Aaron and said to him, "Come, make us a god." So this against suggests that Aaron is really now on Moses' side against the people. The people are taking Aaron as a kind of replacement, substitute for Moses. "Come, make us a god who shall go before us, for that man Moses, who brought us from the land of Egypt, we don't know what has happened to him." And Aaron said to them, "Take the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives and your sons and your daughters, bring them to me." And all the people took off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. This he took from them and cast in a mold and made it into a molten calf. And they exclaimed, "This is your God, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt." Verse 4. And they said, "Vayomru Ele Elohecha." So the noun for God is the generic word for God, or could be translated because it's a plural. "These are your gods," okay, "who brought you up out of the land of Egypt," okay? And when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. So Aaron seems complicitous with the people. And Aaron announced, "Till tomorrow shall be a festival of the Lord." Machar, where is this? Verse 5 at the end. Chag Ladonai Machar. Aaron uses the specific word for the God of Israel, Adonai, while the people use the generic term for God, which is often applied to God, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim. In the beginning, God created heaven and the earth, right? But it can be understood as God's. So if you take that interpretation, the people are willing to worship non-gods. Aaron goes along with their plan, give me your rings and so on, but says, tomorrow will be a festival to the real God. What to make of that? One could make a couple of things of it. Maya?
I just have a question about 4. He said, he made that egel or whatever, and Yomru, and they said, these are your, it's not Aaron says it, the people say it.
It's the people who are saying it.
And I think that it's kind of taking away to a certain extent the responsibility from Aaron, because he's talking about Yehovah and not Elohim.
Right.
So it's kind of, yes, he creates that thing, but he doesn't call it that. People call it that.
So there are really two ways of understanding this. If you're taking the language literally and its meaning, Aaron can be understood as in the following way. The people are pressuring him. Moses isn't back, and we need to worship something. And Aaron, this is the positive interpretation to Aaron, complimented with it. And Aaron says to himself, I've got to mollify the people. But I'm hoping that Moses will come back before this whole thing spins out of control, and that really tomorrow will not be an orgy or a way of worshiping idols, but God. In other words, Aaron is hoping that in the elapse of time until tomorrow, it'll all be straightened out. So Aaron is supporting the people in appearances, but not in reality. And the different uses of God shows that Aaron is still a strict monotheist. Okay? So, on the other hand, Aaron is going along with the people's desire. He's playing as if there are other gods. Or he's not strong enough to say to the people, don't do this. So one could also blame Aaron for being more complicitous than he might be. Let's continue a little bit. Verse 6. Early the next day the people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink, and they rose to dance. And then the scene changes from down below to up on Mount Sinai, and we have this discussion between Moses and God. So let's look at verse 9. The Lord further said to Moses, I see this is a stiff-necked people. Now let me alone, that my anger may blaze forth against them, that I may destroy them, and make of you a great nation. You'll be the new Abraham. We're going to start again. And God has a reputation of being willing to start again, right? He starts again at the time of Noah. I'm going to destroy everything and start again on Noah. After the Tower of Babel, God makes a brand new beginning. So God is not necessarily sticking with plan A. And here comes plan D. We're going to start, you're going to be the new Abraham. Congratulations, you are now Abraham. And Moses demurs, right? But Moses implored the Lord, his God, saying, let not your anger blaze forth against your people, whom you delivered from the land of Egypt with great power and with a mighty hand. And here's my claim. This is Moses the dialectician. Moses who is able to face a challenge with arguments. Moses is a thinker. I mean, this may be a good example of Maimonides' claim that Moses is not only a great prophet, but a great philosopher. Moses knew the truth. Moses saw God face to face. For Maimonides, this means Moses was in intimate touch with the mind of God, with the way things work. Okay? And here we may see an example of Moses the thinker, because the arguments he raises are quite extraordinary. Let not your anger blaze forth against your people. Remember, this is not just some group here. You called them. You made promises to them, whom you delivered from the land of Egypt, you know. You help somebody, you now have an obligation to them. With great power and with a mighty hand. Let not the Egyptians say it was with evil intent that he delivered them, only to kill them off in the mountains and annihilate them from the face of the earth. Turn from your blazing anger, renounce the plan to punish. Remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, how you swore to them by your own self, I will make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the heaven. Yeah. Promises create obligations. That's the logic of promises, isn't it? I promise to raise your allowance. 2 days later, no, I'm not doing it. But you promised is the right response. And you promised to be the God of this people. And the Lord, verse 14, was convinced. And the Lord renounced the punishment he had planned to bring upon his people. Okay, so, God is going to destroy the people. And we might say they deserve something like this until Moses, at the last moment, the moment of crisis, finds a way to convince God, the sole power of the universe, who created the universe and split the Red Sea, allows himself to be persuaded by argument. Thereupon, verse 15, Moses turned and went down from the mountain bearing the 2 tablets. Everything is wonderful. Tablets inscribed on both surfaces and so on. The tablets were God's work. The writing was God. And when Joshua heard the sound of the people, he said to Moses, cry of war in the camp, and so on. Verse 19. As soon as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, he became enraged. I think this is psychologically quite powerful. Moses is, we might think, angry from the very beginning of what he notices down below. But he puts aside his own anger in order to mollify God. That's the main thing. You've got to keep God in the program. And once he has gotten God back in the program, now he is free to express his own anger, which he does. He became enraged, and he hurled the tablets from his hand and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. He took the calf that he had made, and he burned it. He ground it to powder and strewed it upon the water. And Moses said to Aaron, what did this people do to you, that you have brought such great sin upon them? So I don't know if Moses knows how Aaron tried to delay the people. They say, we're going to worship gods tomorrow. He says, you're going to worship God. Maya's idea here of Aaron exonerated, Aaron not complicitous. Moses doesn't agree with that. Moses thinks that Aaron is the ringleader. By the way, if you think of Aaron as poised in the middle between God and the people, bringing God's message to the people, but the people's message to God, here Moses is attributing to Aaron, intercessor. You are now taking the side of the people against God. Here's an inference I'm making. Moses is accusing Aaron of favoring one of 2 possible allies. Is he an ally of God or is he an ally of the people? And when push comes to shove, Aaron is an ally of the people, according to Moses. He's taking on their role. I'm always thinking of Schoenberg's great opera, Moses and Aaron. When Aaron says to Moses' rebuke, what do you expect of the people? The people are needy. I had to help them. Have more sympathy with the people. You can't expect, you, Moses, such an austere person. You got your head in the clouds. You're crafting arguments. You're dealing with abstractions. Remember, if you know Moses and Aaron, Aaron always sings and Moses never sings. Moses talks. Okay, Bennett, yes.
Yeah, I view this as a moment when God is putting people into their positions that he wanted. Moses has grown up and becomes the speaker to the people, and Aaron becomes an intermediary to the people, to Moses or to God, and he works back and forth, but really doesn't have the authority anymore. But Moses has grown up. You don't hear him stuttering anymore.
So you're pointing to, in terms of vocation, in terms of behavior, loyalty, the difference between Moses and Aaron.
Right, and God has created this incident to create this change into what he really wanted from the beginning.
Which is?
To have Moses as the leader and the spokesman to God. He was going to be the connection between God and the people.
God wants this tripartite
Moses
connection.
to stand up and be a leader.
Yeah, right. But notice, I mean, doesn't this strike you? Look, this is a moment of sibling rivalry. Here's where the rivalry comes out between the two of them. And here, brothers, in a way, are now metaphors for two different roles. And don't you think that, in a way, this is helpful to us in terms of the dynamics of sibling rivalry? When siblings develop different predilections, different ways of seeing the world, different ways of dealing with issues. So it strikes me that this very dramatic story is another exploration of some of the causes of sibling rivalry. Here, starkly represented. Okay? It's not accidental that Schoenberg has Aaron sing. You know, when a child is waking up in the middle of the night crying, the parent goes and tries to calm the child. And singing a lullaby is a good way of doing it. Aaron calms the children of Israel when they wake up in a nightmare. And he's trying to make them, he's not so concerned with proper belief. His loyalty is with the people in their weakness. This is Aaron's defense. Let's just go on a little bit. So back to 21, Moses said to Aaron, "What did this people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them?" And Aaron said, "Let not my Lord be enraged. You know this people is bent on evil. Come on, Moses, reckon with human nature. They said to me, 'Make us a god to lead us.' For that man Moses who brought us from the land, we don't know what has happened to him. So I said to them, 'Whoever has gold, take it off.' They gave it to me. I hurled it into the fire, and I was as surprised as anybody. Out came this calf." Right? So he's trying to excuse himself. I didn't really mean the calf here. And yet, he's the one who facilitates the people's desire to have a near God, a God they can touch, as opposed to an austere God. That's Moses' God. Moses' God is austere. Let's just go on just a little bit. Moses saw, verse 25, the people were out of control, since Aaron let them get out of control, so that they were a menace to any who might oppose them. Moses stood up in the gate of the camp. Whoever is for the Lord, come here. And all the Levites rallied to him, and he said, this is what you get for purity, pure faith that doesn't make room for the vacillations and the weaknesses of the people. This is going to be a purge. And he said to them, thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, each of you put on a sword, go back and forth, gate to gate, slay brother, neighbor, and kin. The Levites did as Moses had bidden. Some 3,000 of the people fell that day. And Moses says, dedicate yourselves to the Lord this day, for each of you has been against son and brother, that he may bestow a blessing upon you today. That's a pretty ugly passage, isn't it? This is what God wants. God wants the slaughter. And this is the purity of belief slipping into fanaticism. In a way, it's the dynamic of absolute belief without some sense about the weaknesses, the problems on the ground. So this is a moment of sibling rivalry, which points to something powerful about the phenomenon of sibling rivalry. Different children with different predilections, different views of things. Aaron's worldview is very different from Moses' worldview. And what is interesting is they do come back together again and work together for the rest of their lives, with one little exception. In Leviticus, Moses is the one who, before he ordains Aaron, brings about the ritual, the sacrifices. So there is a hint here that some scholars have taken up of the biblical author suppresses what is called in the literature a Mushite priesthood, a Mosaic priesthood, where Moses initially took on for himself the role of prophet and priest, and only because, so this argument goes, the Aaronide partisans who become authors insisted that Aaron be the one who does it, and they suppressed this whole Mushite priesthood, which nevertheless one can discover deep under the surface of the text. And that may be another intimation of the difference of worldview, which creates a clash. Another element of what I'm calling sibling rivalry. I just want to point out what happens near the end. So let's turn to Numbers chapter 20. This is that whole business of striking the rock. And we don't have to go through that because they are working together. In other words, theirs is a story of cooperation with some significant exceptions to that. Let's look at, you're going to find this an exaggeration, but I find it evocative. So, verse 28 of chapter 20. Moses stripped them. You remember that God now says to them, because they struck the rock or whatever their sin was, that neither gets into the promised land. Okay? Aaron dies here. Verse 28. Moses stripped Aaron of his vestments and put them on his son Eleazar, and Aaron died there on the summit of the mountain. When Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain, the whole community knew that Aaron had breathed his last. All the house of Israel bewailed Aaron 30 days. So, in the Hebrew. Vayivku, they wept. Vayivku et Aharon, they wept for Aaron, Shloshim Yom, 30 days, Kol Beit Yisrael, the whole house of Israel. Let's go now to chapter 34 of Deuteronomy. Verse 8. This is the death of Moses. Vayivku, same verb, they wept. B'nai Yisrael et Moshe. The word kol is not repeated in the people's reaction to the death of Moses, from which the Midrash, I think in a fascinating way, tries to capture something of the big difference between Moses and Aaron. Who mourns for Aaron? Everybody. Who mourns for Moses? Not everybody. Aaron is popular with the people. His death strikes them as a big catastrophe, and everybody, from top to bottom, from left to right, mourns him. Moses, because he's not a people person the way Aaron is, Moses has his head in the clouds. Moses is interested in abstractions, the pure God. And recognize that at the end of the opera, I lack the words to get across my meaning. Das Wort which mir fehlt, which fails me. And according to the Midrash, this difference between the two is captured by the way in which people mourn for either of them. Okay, so, Gary.
It does say in the final sentence here, and the Israelites bewailed Moses in the steppes of Moab for 30 days.
Yes.
It's the same as Aaron.
Same as Aaron, same amount of time. But not everybody. By implication, you could say, here the Midrash is stretching a little bit. But the rabbis are close readers, and it strikes me that the point that they make, though it may be trivial in terms of, look, the author at one point says the people, another point he has the word all. Don't make such a big deal out of this. And yet, the reason I bring it is that even though it seems arbitrary and a big deal, much too big a deal, it does capture, according to a certain interpretation, the difference between the prophet and the priest, represented by, in this story, brothers. Okay, so, what do you think about this as a sibling rivalry story? Russell?
So, I just want to say maybe there is rivalry, but maybe there's also camaraderie and commonality to getting the job done and fulfilling the purpose. Because if you look at it kind of from a business situation, Moses is focused on good at managing up, and Aaron is focused on good at managing down. And both of those aspects are necessary.
So you're emphasizing complementarity.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there isn't rivalry, but there's a positive aspect.
Right, and I think I totally agree with this. I think this makes this a very fascinating story. They're able to have a complex relationship, working together, but below the surface are some significant differences which manifest themselves in moments of crisis. Think about the ways in which the children of aging parents deal with that question. Hey, I'm in town, and I'm working with Mother every single day, and you live 500 miles away. But help me. You have a different view of this than I do. They work together, but they're approaching it differently from their own, somewhat differently. I don't want to underestimate the role of circumstances, but nevertheless, there are these tensions even among siblings who have a good relationship. Jordan?
You said they worked together after this episode, but Miriam and Aaron both came up against Moses because he married a Cushite.
Yes.
Similar to Esau marrying Hittite women, which bothered them Isaac and Rebekah. So the only sibling rivalry I see is in the brother and sister attacking Moses. Otherwise, it's a difference of the leader and the subordinate, the second in command. They could be friends, people from the same tribe. They don't have to be brothers.
Yeah,
But
right.
this was the Moses versus Miriam and Aaron. Seems more
Good.
like sibling rivalry.
So, unless I'm misinterpreting what you've said, you feel that this is not really a story of sibling rivalry. Yes, there is an episode of sibling rivalry there in Numbers chapter 12 about the Cushite woman, but the rest of this is the way in which people might work together or not work together, and it's not so much about brothers, people in the same family. Okay? So, I've tried to make a case that this is an example of sibling rivalry. As I've said this in the last hour, I have noticed disagreement about that claim, and Jordan is articulating it. Okay, very good. Is this a story of sibling rivalry? Doris?
I'm with Jordan on this. I have a problem with rivalry. We say the Browns have a rivalry with the Steelers.
Yes.
It's going on for a while. If I said to you, the Browns have a rivalry with the Colts, you might say, oh, really? I didn't know. Well, today they do, but it's not like with the Steelers, a long period. And this is Moses and Aaron, even though people disagree with them, you among them, I mean the real scholars like you. These two men are great brothers, supportive of each other, with some disagreements. That's fair, but
So-
not a rivalry.
Okay, so your point is to count as a rivalry, it just can't be focused on an episode or two. It has to have some continuity, durability, and this doesn't have it.
Continuity, you're right, and coherence with, we have to find something before and after that links. We're looking for links.
Links or causes?
Psychological links.
By links, you mean causes?
Yeah, that's a good point. I do mean causes.
Okay. So you, yes, as you said, you're with Jordan on this one. This is not really sibling rivalry because it doesn't satisfy the criteria of a real rivalry. This is the Baltimore Colts and the Browns. This is not the Steelers. This is the Yankees and the Red Sox.
Right.
And we hate them both. I'm just, Carol?
They don't have the same family dynamics as Jacob and Esau and others. I mean, they lived together for what, the first 3 years of Moses' life?
Uh-huh.
And then they had very separate lives. So Moses was living in a family where what Pharaoh said is what happened. So he grew up saying, God made me the leader. What I say is supposed to happen. Aaron, make it happen. So it's certainly not at all the same family dynamics.
And it strikes me, Carol, that what would make it a family dynamic is to see more of it in the family. That we really don't see the family, and therefore, is that true? You wouldn't, if you saw more of it in their family rather than after they've left home and take on different roles, complementary roles. Are you saying that, I'm going to push this a little, that a necessary condition for sibling rivalry is evidence that in their birth family are already the problems, which by definition have to have been created by the parents? Unless we see parental activity, it's not genuine sibling rivalry. That's a little too big a statement. But you seem to be saying something about it has to have happened already near the beginning.
It has to have happened over a period of time.
over a period of time. That in a way is Doris's point too. We see an episode or two. Nancy?
I feel that it did present itself in the parenting skills at the beginning when Miriam was told to look after her brother.
Yes.
So the scene is set where, you're part of a family. Take care. And so I think parents set the tone for the children. So when Aaron and Moses, when Moses came down and he was so angry and he yelled it or stormed it, Aaron responded and came to a like mind eventually. So it wasn't like, it was more cohesive because the parents, it's a leap, but the parents set the tone for the family to be supportive.
So the parental home was a healthy one. Evidenced
But
by...
he didn't have home for 3 months.
Wait, hold on. Is that your point, Nancy? That the very fact that she says to Miriam, take care of your brother, is a good indication.
That they had basic values, and Moses was only in the home for 3 months, but Aaron's the one who agreed, who eventually conceded.
Very good. I have a bar mitzvah too, but I want to take one of our famous votes. So, it's a good thing I'm not easily hurt here. How many think this is a story of sibling rivalry? How many are very pleased to hurt the rabbi? Okay? No, I remember the story this episode we had about Joshua. It's one of my favorite stories of all time. I tried to remember we did the book of Joshua many years ago. I tried to make the case that there's a sub narrative, alternative narrative going on in this book. And at the end of the book, when I worked my hardest, and I thought most brilliant, in making the case for a alternative narrative, and I asked how many agree there's only one person in the room who thought so. And that was me. What a kick. Okay, so it's not, according to you guys, not according to what's true. Very good. Lovely discussion. I'll see you next week. Shabbat shalom.
Hey.
Oh, it's good to see you.
Thank you. I got my assignment yesterday. Of course.
What do you put a rival on the bound?
For Thanksgiving, we're going to Multnomah's Oh, and green vegetables.
Oh, well.
When it happens, I'll believe it. What I mean is, dates might get and then state obviously have to move for Rick is scared. He said, okay, your house is occupied. If it comes, stay with us as well. Which is why
They get turned around and see
yeah, and I will.
Happy trails to the same for happy Friday. And next year.
The worst that'll happen is that this great, it's interesting.
But you're gonna be in. That better than tomorrow, Saturday?
This is the problem when they go away. That's going to be the biggest change. From driving. Self-actualizing.
I'm coming along, you guys.
Yeah, well, that's true. Take care, have a safe flight.
One up by you. One on Maple Road. You wanna go there?
So that was brilliant.
There's the other one here. Oh, the other one's
The whole thing's the best.
Okay, so we go with
Only is 2 hands by
How's that?
10:30 tomorrow. I got no. And if we decide
What?
I don't mind typing it out and sending it to Cindy next week.
to make one.
Right. That'll be, alright, so that's what we'll do. And I like to the idea.
lot of people have to have a step up.
It's always the second or third.
My daughter originated from
If the weather holds up for the direction, like I said, you're not having all these sandwiches. Good. It's one of the, we're planning on driving to New York. Right, okay. As a choice, kids have plans. So this is gonna be
3 hours after Tuesday.
So I can start filling it in and getting it to her.
So much for DVS.
I want to get that done. Well,
So we're just going from Wednesday to Saturday. We don't want to drive. We're driving on Saturday. As long as the weather cooperates. It's not enough. Every after, as a part-time, every 3 classes.
You just want, you want to do it yourself or you want me to?
I need the headlines for what she
I know.
The last
So,
time I said.
you need me to, you need to.
As soon as it's
It's going to be a virtual interview. They're going to tell you.
It's easier for me to fill out her headlines and send it to her in an email.
We're gonna do the agenda.
I'll do the agenda
for
first.
Temple, Temple Seeds, because I told you I already laid out, I already have it written down, stuff.
Yeah,
It will come out. Yeah. Yeah, all right, but that's good. All right.
You know,
Okay, so.
and I'll see you at 10:30.
Yeah.
Bye, ladies.
Have a fun day.
Have a great day.
At the concert, great. You won't want to Are you and Jean splitting or dividing in conference? Or are you going together? Are you going to one of your children's houses?
That's the island.
Well, you get aside the rest of this. You have to talk about theological.
Oh, yes.
Yes, that's a pretty good. Oh, okay, well, tell her I'm going.
It's a shaker.
They die out.
Yeah, so I don't know the difference between Oh, they were very, okay. Yeah, because they were yeah.
They were very different thinkers.
Okay, yeah, right.
And everyone.
Oh, man.
So,
Not for Jordan, but he does this.
No, I only knew about this because of art, they were gonna be there, she was fabulous.
Yeah, because our Quakers don't have services to overnight.
Yes, she's never, yes, her assignment was, you have to look at this paper.
That's what they do. So they,
Yes, that's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, of course. All right.
interesting.
Well,
They already voted.
yeah, I think
Now,
it's.
having to report to
So you're asking him to go back? It would be, well, right. Boy. Yeah, right. And then it goes to. Yeah. Oh, that's the way. Yes, it can be. Well, yes. Right. Well, I think that's a great project. I really like that.
She has other problems. Only children often, my daughter has said,